Hey my friend, this is Joe Bakhmotsky. I am the founder of Power to Be Happy, and I'm also the author of Finding Hope in Times of Uncertainty, a guide to thriving in the challenging world of today. Right now, I'm talking to you about a crucial area of our lives, which is how do you deal with pressure at work? Because isn't it true that today we're facing unprecedented levels of stress, of uncertainty, of worry in our lives? Now, more so than ever, we're having difficulty separating our work lives and our personal lives as well. And it becomes much more difficult to manage as you might be working from home, as your circumstances personally might have changed. So it's a difficult balance to strike at the best of times, and it's even more difficult to do now. And the reality is, it makes our life so much more difficult because, as you know, from having to deal with pressure, one of the worst thing that it does is that you really can't focus on anything. You're kind of all over the place and you can't concentrate on any one given thing. And when you can't focus, you never get anything done. So you get frustrated. And then you also, on top of that, you get worried because you're always thinking about the next thing, right? You're always thinking about, the next email that you must write. And that's why you're having to go home sometimes. And you're in the place where you can't really relax. You can't unwind because you're always thinking, what have I got to do tomorrow? How is that project going that, I feel like I'm behind on? What about all those things I have to catch up with? And so you get stressed out about all those things that might happen in the future. And that's why it becomes so difficult, because you become on edge. And it's easier to kind of snap at someone that's personal, that's close to you, that you care about. And it just leads to all sorts of unwanted emotions. And it affects not only the way that you are with people that you truly care about, which is your partner, your family, your friends, your teammates, but also it affects your health. It affects how it can cause a tremendous amount of problems for you. That's why we really need to find better ways of dealing with pressure. And I'm going to share with you 4 key ideas on how you can really manage it in your life in a way that brings more calm and control and that much needed stability in your life, and helping you to separate your work life from your personal life in a way that is manageable and helps you to really bring it home in a sustainable way. First of all, let's talk about what is pressure, right? Because we don't often ask ourselves that question. I truly believe that pressure, to me, is unreasonable expectations that are weighing you down. Unreasonable because it's hard to make them work. It's hard to manage, and it puts extra stress on you, and it's weighing you down because it makes your life difficult, right? Because if it's not making your life more challenging, then you're probably dealing with it in an okay way. So pressure is really unrealistic, unreasonable expectations that might be weighing you down right now. And we're going to talk about everything from 2 different perspectives. One is the pressure that other people put on you. This might be your clients, this might be your boss, this might be your teammates. That's on one side. But on the other hand, we need to be talking about how to deal with pressure that you put on yourself. And that is something that doesn't get covered enough, because we often talk about pressure from other people, but what about the pressure that and unrealistic expectations that you put upon you yourself, that are really weighing you down and making your life more stressful, more challenging, more harder to sustain over the long term in the way that you are with your key relationships in your life and your health. So the first thing I want to talk about is the demand. So we're going to go deep on this, and by deep I mean it's an acronym, right? So the first part of it, the D part of it is really the demand. Is what is the demand that are placed upon you by other people and also yourself. Because quite often I find that the demand is all those things that just come flying at you. It just kind of hits you, and you just kind of, you try to hold it all together, and you try to somehow juggle, even when it's too much, even when it's not working. And we have trouble to kind of separate what's important, what's busy work that we might get stuck in, and what is something that is making a real tangible difference. And the filter that I want to ask you to put on the demand that comes your way are these tasks, are these activities, are they really making a difference and helping me to contribute to my team or my customers or my clients or my environment in a real tangible way? Or could it be done differently? Could someone else potentially help me with that? And I'm not asking you to find answers immediately, but to start questioning things that are coming your way and saying, does it really lead to outcomes, tangible outcomes, or does it really lead to results that are really going to benefit someone over the long term? Because if they're not, maybe then they could be reprioritized. Maybe they could be offloaded. Maybe they could be put aside for a while. Because sometimes people often talk about things that are urgent, but oftentimes I found that the more urgent something is, the less urgent it actually is. Because in a strange way, oftentimes you get all of these problems that are not related to you. It's because maybe some other people are behind on their tasks, and you end up getting things on your plate that maybe you need, and frankly are not even going to make a big difference. And it kind of ends up being busy work that ends up not making a difference to someone in a big way whatsoever. Another thing about demand is I also think about it in the context of, what does it do for your career? What does it do for you, for your long-term prospects in your job or for your business? Is this the demand? Are these tasks, are they making you grow? Are they taking you closer to where you want to be in life? If not, maybe it's time to think about them in a more kind of strategic way, where you really ask yourself, well, what is it that I can do that can really move the needle for me over the long term? That would help me and my team in my job, in my business. It's going to make a real difference over the long term. So looking at the demand in a way and asking, does it really lead to significant real world outcomes for me and the people that I work with or for? Second thing I want to ask you, and second big idea here is, what is the extent of what you're doing? So we just talked about the demand, which is the demand that kind of comes in you from other people, but also from yourself, but also the extent of it. What I really mean is, well, how far are you willing to go to meet this demand? Right? That is the question we often don't ask ourselves, because that means that we have to set boundaries for other people and for what we do ourselves in our daily life. Is how far are we willing to go to meet this demand? And setting these boundaries in place is crucial, because if you don't set them up, you end up burning yourself out. It just becomes unsustainable. It's not something you could do over the long term, because it puts pressure on your personal relationships, with how you are with your family, with your friends, with your partner, in your community. It also puts tremendous strain on your health, of how you are physically, and leads to chronic disease, leads to heart disease, leads to all sorts of problems. I don't need to tell you that the level of stress can affect us in a tremendous way, and we need to be really mindful of how that works for us. So we need to be able to set up these boundaries, both for other people and also for ourselves. And it means, for ourselves, it means creating routines that end up working for you. I know for me, I remember when I started to work from home, I initially thought, well, look, I'm going to set up an hour for lunch, and that's where I'm going to do all my personal stuff. And it just happened and setting up that hour from 12 to 1, it never really worked. I always got dragged away doing things with the family or getting stuck in, in some meeting at work, and I never ended up doing anything about it. And so I was just really frustrated because I was just losing time and I was never really getting what I wanted to do until I really changed my day around. And I started, instead of taking that hour for lunch, I started to take the time really early in the morning to get a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do in my personal life, like like writing this book, for example. So I started to really get on top of how do I manage my own times and what are the expectations that I have on myself. Are they feasible? Are they realistic? Can they be managed in a practical kind of daily way? And with other people, this is the third idea that I've got for you today, is, and I call it education. I think this comes with taking those boundaries and explaining them to people as to what they are. Because often what ends up happening is when we have those expectations placed on us by people around us, they could be your clients, they could be your teammates, it could be your boss, right? What ends up happening is they place all of these expectations on us. And they might not be fair, they might be unreasonable, but don't forget that they don't know you or your specific situations or what you're working with, right? Even if they've known you for years, even if you worked side by side with them for the longest time, they don't know how your day works. They might be experiencing pressure themselves. They might be dealing with a lot of stress in their personal lives. We don't know what that is. I think what we can do to really make a difference is to look at it not from a perspective of getting frustrated with them, but to really explain them to them in a very explicit way. And I call it education. We're educating people around you on what your demand is, and we're educating them as to what the extent you're willing to go. How far are you willing to extend yourself to what the demand is? And that is the true essence of bringing people back to be level with where you want to be and where they are, is bringing back by educating them and explaining it to them in a really direct way, as direct as you can possibly be. Because when you can bring them back to your level and to understand, say, this is the demand that I'm facing, this is the extent that I'm willing to go because of these circumstances, and so you're effectively giving them the reasons why. This is a critical point of not getting angry or getting frustrated. Think of yourself as a teacher in the primary school. Different kids have different needs, right? And different levels of learning. And sometimes you gotta be patient with them. And you gotta sit down with them and explain to them how things work. It's not their fault that maybe some of them don't really understand where you're coming from. You might try a different perspective. You might have to bring them in, and explain it from a kind of in a different way. Or you might have to explain something several times so that they understand. But if you give them enough explanation and you're explicit enough, they'll come around, and they can go in a significant way towards taking off that pressure, because you're bringing people along with you on that journey. And the last idea I've got for you today is patience. All too often we end up in this place in our lives where we get frustrated and mad at people around us because they've been unreasonable or because there's just too much going on. And we also end up being so kind of just frustrated ourselves because there is so much that we are dealing with. And I'm asking you to find patience for yourself, because oftentimes we are not where we would like to be in our lives. You probably have your own dreams, your own ambitions, your own vision of where you want to be in life and what you want to achieve. And that's fantastic, right? And it's important to push yourself, to keep pushing yourself and people around you. But also it's important to realize that you don't want to push yourself too far So we want to be able to find a way in which you're doing that in a sustainable way, in a way that really can make sure that you are doing it in a way that you can contribute, in the biggest way over the long term, so that you're not burning yourself out, so that you're not ruining relationships at your work, right, with people that, with your team, with, in your business, with your clients, with your boss, well, whoever that might be, right? But you're also, taking care of those people in your personal life. And that's why the patience comes from back to looking after yourself. And just ask yourself, are you, and you know the answer to this. The truth is, you know this, and we all know this, and sometimes we just kind of turn away from the reality of, are you really looking after yourself in the way that you should be? Are you really giving yourself the time to unwind and relax? When was the last time you've taken a holiday? When was the last time you've just went on a break somewhere? When was the last time you've taken a day trip that was just for you, right? When was the time when you've really set out and spent time doing things that you truly care about, like your hobbies or your interests? Are you really looking after your health? Are you doing enough exercise or just physical activity? Are you eating in a more or less healthy and a sustainable way that looks after your body? I think that's all a part of patience, and having the patience to really get to where you want to be, but also to do it in a way that you can sustain over the long term and which really takes you there in one piece, right? So these are the 4 key things that I think are critical to dealing with pressure at work. One is how you manage the demand and filtering the demand through understanding what is going to make the biggest difference in terms of real world outcomes, what is going to give those results, and putting some of those things that are not going to do that for you and putting them aside, or getting someone to help you with that, or just concentrating on things that end up moving the needle instead of getting caught up in busy work and other people's problems, frankly speaking. The second idea I've got for you is the extent, right? We've talked about the demand, but how far are you willing to go to meet that demand, and really understanding what that means for you and for your life? And that's at the extent of how far you're willing to go for people around you. There could be your customers or your boss, but it's also how far you're willing to go for yourself in terms of making sure that you are striking a balance between your personal life but also your work life as well. And then the third thing is education. Is educating people around you on what your needs are and explaining them what the demand is, and explaining what the extent is of how far you're willing to go to meet the demand. Essentially, explaining to them in an explicit and a direct way of how far you're willing to go and why. And people will come around, even if it takes a few times or a few different approaches to explain to them why you do things a certain way. The fourth thing is finding patience. Finding patience for other people and giving them the chance to come around, to understand your world and where you're coming from, and the pressures that you're under and what you want to achieve in life. But also having patience for yourself and saying, am I taking on too much? Am I trying to kind of do too many things? Am I trying to get the most done that I can for my personal life? Is this what's going to make the biggest difference to me and to my life? So I hope this makes a difference for you. As always, feel free to reach out to me and comment. I'd love to hear your perspective, but I hope that these 4 ideas can help you to really go deep in managing the way that you deal with pressure in your life, to reclaim some of that calm, some of that stability in your life, so that ultimately you can get to your goals faster and in a more sustainable way.